Hello, once again, this is Ramirez from Tidewater Renaissance Fighting Arts, and I have a little bit of things to discuss. Um, I recently injured my back actually earlier this week, and so that has kind of affected my choice in training. But I'm on the mend and getting better and looking forward to getting right back into my full workout regimen. But while I'm here, what I want to talk about is competing in HEMA. And I know that there's been various controversies. I don't want to really talk about any of those. I really want to talk about if you decide you want to compete in HEMA. Now, I don't want to talk about this if you're part of a school who already has a highly competitive program. I think the person to really talk to are your own club leaders, your own school coaches, because they'll be able to direct you about what's best for you as far as competing. What I really want to talk about is if you're a smaller club and you don't have a lot of resources for competition, what you should do, why you should do it, or why you shouldn't. And the first thing is, let's say, okay, you've been doing HEMA for a while, you've heard about competitions, and you've decided you want to do this, but your school doesn't have a competitive program. In my school, I am one of two active competitors. The majority of our people, they do sparring, they'll do different events that we host, but they don't actually actively compete on the circuit. And because of that, we don't really devote a lot of time to having an active competitor program aside from me and one of the other instructors who competes. When you do any type of competition, you have to ask yourself what's your goal when it comes to why do you want to compete? And why you should want to compete is ultimately it's about being better. It's not about winning medals. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of people go in. They're like, oh, well, I'm the best in my club. I can beat everyone. So I'll go out there and then I'll come back with a gold medal. And I'll be honest with you, whatever your pool is, especially if you're not in a highly competitive school, you're probably going into a much deeper pool, so to speak, of talent than your local club has. So you might go in expecting, well, I do the best in my club. I'm going to do the best at this event. And you may come into some culture shock because you may find that you're out in the first pool. You're beaten out. So going in thinking, okay, well, I'm great where I am. I'm going to be great against everyone else is unrealistic. So what I encourage my students, and not only in HEMA, I'm a former ballroom dance coach, and what I would tell them in ballroom is the same thing I would tell them in HEMA, which is your goal should be that this process of training for a tournament is going to make you a better fencer, a better fighter overall, because you're going to commit to yourself a level of training, a level of sparring that will increase your overall ability. And if that's your goal, I think that competition is very, very healthy because the goal isn't necessarily to be the best, but to be a better version of yourself between the time you make the decision to compete to the time you actually go through the competition. And when you're done, medals or no medals, awards or no awards, you're going to be a better fencer for having done this experience. And with that in mind, you're always going to be a winner. And that is very important to your mindset if you're going to compete, is that no matter what happens, win, lose at the event, that the training, the commitment to yourself to be better, to work harder, will ultimately result in a better you, a better fencer, maybe a more fit fencer, whatever it is. You're going to get goals that are going to make you a better fencer than if you had just stayed home, trained with your local club, and not put this decision to make greater effort. Now, with that said, okay, you decide I'm going to do a competition, and then you have to kind of decide which competition. And I hate to say it, but not all competitions are the same. And some might dictate their competition by what they can afford, the competition that's closest to them, um, the one that is most available. But some competitions have classes, workshops, etc. attached to them that might highly benefit you. They might allow you to take those classes and bring that knowledge back to your own club. And if you're an instructor or you're just a lead person in a community, that can be very helpful to have some fresh ideas to bring back. So looking at events that have competitions and also have different types of workshops can be very, very helpful. Other people, it's like I compete in multiple different weapons, and knowing that the weapons forms that you use, if you use rapier, if you use rapier and dagger, if you use buckler, sword and buckler, or saber, or longsword, or in some cases spear, um, finding events that cater to the weapons forms that you are training in is also a good thing. I've set myself to compete at Icebreaker, and one of the reasons that I chose that tournament it's not close. I have to fly out to go to it. Is as you can see by the beard, I'm not a young man, and they have an over 45 division, and I find that competing with a lot of the older fencers, um, there are some very skilled, very talented people, and a lot of people who are in that division also end up doing very well in the open division. So it's sort of like a fast track to get to fight some of the more highly experienced fencers and coaches in a HEMA tournament. And so the fact they had one was motivating for me to actually participate in that event. Um, if not, once again, you may be new and maybe you want to do the novice division and then do the open division. And that gives you just more opportunities to fight over a period of time. If you're new and you don't have a club that as I said, they have a tournament schedule, like we do this one, this one, this one, this one, you're going to be picking your own. You're going to be making that decision. One thing that I would strongly encourage you to do is if you know what the tournament is, as soon as registration opens, sign up. Don't try to wait for like the month before or the week before, whatever it is. Odds are most events fill up before then. And you're not giving yourself time to commit to training and making yourself better. I always believe I try to sign up for a tournament like day one, day two that registration opens up. And part of the reason for that is now I've set a goal. If the tournament's 3 months away or 4 months away, I have that much time to bring my A game to its top level. And I'm giving myself a good chance to understand the rules, to practice under that rule set, to understand what I need to do to make myself a solid competitor for that event. So if you can, if you're going to compete, give yourself the most time to train, to decide, okay, I'm going to do this and set a goal for yourself, that 3-month goal or that 4-month goal of I'm going to work really, really hard at my whatever events or divisions or weapons you're fighting it with. That's what you focus on. I use a lot of different weapons, but if I'm competing in longsword, I'm not going to spend time training in Montante or training my rapier. I'm going to really kind of laser focus on, I'm going to be good at longsword. Or if I'm going to do longsword and rapier, then I'm going to focus on these two things. And I'm going to just try to really, really be good at those two things. And it's not that I want to degrade my other skills, but if I'm going to be a better fencer and I'm going to take the time to do a tournament, I really want to be laser focused on that and make that my priority. And I would encourage you, if you're choosing to go into a tournament, say, okay, don't try to do everything, especially if it's your first or second tournament. Pick one, maybe two weapons forms that you want to do and compete in just those. Even if you go to some events where they may have 5 or 6 different weapon categories that you can pick from. Try to focus, try to narrow that down so that you can really spend the quality time you need to be the best fencer you can in that weapons form. I have tried doing multiples, and sometimes that's really come to bite me in the butt in terms of one time I did a tournament where I was doing longsword and I was doing rapier. And I did very well on longsword because I really trained on that. And I had done rapier in the same event, and I absolutely bombed because there was not enough time to really focus my skill on longsword and devote my time to rapier because they really are two different arts. If you happen to be very good at both, great, but I would rather do well and make a positive impact on the weapons forms that I'm doing. Last summer I did an event where I did 3 weapons, and I did okay in one, I did good in another, and I did badly in a third. So, I would once again, if I do that event again, I'll narrow it down to 2 and I'll focus on those 2 weapons forms. Next up is if you plan to do an event and you register early, try to get all your stuff, all your ducks in a row earlier rather than later. And what I mean by that is if you're flying out somewhere, get that plane ticket early because plane tickets go up in price as you get closer to the event. Figure out if it's not an event that has a hotel attached to it, where are you going to stay? And I'm not saying you have to stay in a hotel. You could, if you have friends in the area, you could stay with them. Understand how that affects your schedule. I personally believe I like to be close. If a tournament has a hotel that's like next to it, I prefer to be there just because it makes life a lot easier. The next one I'm going to has no official hotel attached to the event because most people are local. So I had to find one that wasn't too far, but it means that, when I want to go to rest or anything, I got to get in a car, travel to the hotel to rest. So mixed bag, but you make those preparations, and I have to decide how I'm going to transport myself. Now I've already rented a car for those days, so I will have a car and I'll be able to go back and forth. If you are driving to an event, then you already have that car, not as much an issue. But these are all things you want to keep in mind. You don't want to be like trying to do all that last minute, and also that will affect how much things cost. Anytime you delay on those things, that'll up the cost. And let's be honest, fighting regularly in tournaments is not necessarily a cheap endeavor, but we can do things that will help us with that. Also, I find when I've made that payment early to fly out somewhere or reserve a hotel, I'm like, I was already committed when I registered. Now I'm doubly committed because I've spent this extra money to make sure this is something I'm going to do. So that can also be a motivating factor. Now, I really want to break up this discussion from just the basics of, okay, you're in a small group, or a smaller club doesn't generally compete, you want to compete, and I want to break this down to a couple of different discussions. So today we just wanted to talk about why you compete. And you compete to be a better you, to be a better fencer. Don't try to do it to necessarily win awards, especially if this is just your first, second, third competition. Try to focus on it being about you being better, about improving yourself. If you do that, you're going to have a better experience. Pick your tournaments. Try to do some research on the tournaments. If you're a beginner, you may not want to go to something like SoCal or Combat Con. And I speak about this as having made that mistake. My first competition was Combat Con, and I was not suitably ready. Even with all the training I did, I was not ready for that environment. So you might want to choose something a little smaller and scale back and then go do something bigger later on. Start early, register early, know that you're going to do this, and that way you can make the commitment to training and being at that place. If you have expenses that are going to go into that tournament, like travel, lodging, try to make those commitments early because, once again, things inherently get more expensive. So it might be anywhere from $200 to $500 difference if you choose to do something earlier versus choosing to do something later. So once again, if you can and your budget allows it, try to make sure you do that early. Don't register late because you may find the events that you want to do are already full. Don't try to get in last minute where you're not really going to be at your training apex when you do that. I'm going to get in a little more detail about what you should do between the registration phase, that first phase of making a decision to doing it, to getting to it and doing it in a little bit in another discussion. If you did find this interesting, please let me know. If you have any other thoughts, please leave them in the comments below. Once again, this is Ramirez with Tidewater Renaissance Fighting Arts, and I will see you in the next video.